I hope everyone is having a great hump day and having a positive and profitable week as well. I would like to thank you all for joining me and giving me a little bit of your time. Today, we'll be having a discussion about the Brian Banks movie and how it relates to toxic feminine outcomes in real time. I have provided a link to the trailer for the movie that will be released on August 9th by Bleecker Street. One of the main actors that I saw in there will be Morgan Freeman. And I mean, Morgan Freeman, he usually delivers good movies. And this is one of those movies that so relates to the black male experience and some of the consequences of misandry in the United States. And I think that as more and more of these stories hit the headlines, more and more people will begin to reject this fourth to fifth wave feminism that has overtaken America over the last decade or so. And I've already made a prediction that for the most part, the social justice warrior, politically correct culture has already popped as we started 2019 and is really ramped up. You can really see this playing out in politics in the way that male politicians that have guts and fortitude are no longer cucking themselves for the benefit of groups that hate men. I mean, the truth is, there's a strong, toxic femininity and also just a general misandry in the United States and throughout the West. And it just kind of peaked. And you kind of see that with what's going on with Donald Trump and his war with identity politics and the reaction for those that use identity politics as a weapon and as a shield for their own selfish gain. And that's unfortunate because there's real issues in America related to things like racism, classism, sexism, injustices or whatnot. But what happens is that you have certain forces that use these things to benefit themselves. And that relates directly to someone like a Brian Banks, who, Brian Banks was convicted out there in California. And we know how strong the social justice warrior energy and the radical feminist energy is out there. But I wanted to kind of like lead off this discussion with some misandry that was in the news this week. A case that came to me was the case of Gillette, which falls under the umbrella of a Procter and Gamble. In these male spaces on YouTube and throughout social media, we've been aware of what was going on with Gillette and their toxic masculinity campaign that started in January. There was a popular ad for the wrong reasons. It was popular because of the backlash. I mean, I think YouTube and Gillette pulled the video for the ad because it had gotten so many down votes. I think it was like the down votes was like 10% of the people liked it and 90% hated it. And it was just so much vitriol coming from men who were just fed up. I knew for a while that it was going to get to the point where men were just going to be like, we have nothing to lose anymore, because when you start taking people's like livelihoods away from them, you start to intrude on their privacy. You start to intrude on their pleasure as well. Many men are going to start to fight back because there's no longer any flight option. There's nowhere to run to, right? So there's nowhere to run to. And I saw how many people said, I'm not going to buy these Gillette razors. I'm going to go get, Dollar Club razors or other alternative options, because there's plenty of options out there. And so the digital response from men across the world to that misandry that Gillette put out in that ad, it was very loud. And I mean, many of the, even, usually when it comes to mainstream, they try to downplay these type of things, but the backlash was so strong that even the mainstream had to take up those articles to try to like soften the blow, thinking that it was not going to be as badly as it was in the terms of an economic boycott. As a consumer, you have to understand you have so much power where you put your dollar or where you don't put your dollar. 70% of this economy in America in particular is based on consumption. So anything that would become an obstacle to consumption is going to be a problem for corporations and even governments as well, because we know that our government has mostly become nothing but a sellout corporation for the interest of corporations, right? So Gillette, they had an $8 billion loss because of men going on strike of their products. I mean, you know, we throw numbers around all the time, but I'm going to go through this article real quick. So the article in the New York Post yesterday said that non-shavers rivals bleeding Gillette as Procter & Gamble takes $8 billion right now. Now, you know how the mainstream media will try to flip it. They'll be like, oh, well, you know, people aren't shaving. That's the reason. No, that's not the reason why. They weren't complaining about it in 2018, 2017, and 2016, but all of a sudden now you're like, oh, well, no one's shaving anymore. That's not the case. The truth is that men boycotted Gillette because of the toxic masculinity narrative that they were trying to promote, because that all happened around the time when the American Psychological Association came out with their whole definition of toxic masculinity. And then they came up with this ad almost like, what, less than 30 days later. So it was all connected to these corporations attempting to shame men for being men and to make men believe that somehow masculinity is a bad thing and femininity is a good thing, even though there's no proof that femininity has positive outcomes for a civilization. But there are definitely thousands of years of evidence that patriarchy is good for men, women, and children, because it makes men protectors, nurturers, and innovators and creators. And also, if they're guided by ideas like ethics, morals, and justice, then men will tend to do the right thing. So this whole toxic masculinity narrative that has been pushed over the last 10 years, the pushback is now coming. That's one of the reasons why so many people support someone like Donald Trump, because he stands on the fact that he's a man and he's not going to let them put a skirt on him, and he's not going to let social justice warriors censor him, whatever your opinions of him happen to be. But I know one thing: I'm not for censorship, and I'm not for gender bias against men. And that's what we have. So Gillette and Procter & Gamble, I mean, they took a big loss, $8 billion. We throw numbers like that around and people don't even blink, but think about it. 8 billion, how many jobs does that represent, right? How many people are going to get laid off from Gillette because of the error of maybe the chief marketing of operations, right? So typically, you know, you have your sales department and marketing, and that's supposed to bring in, you know, the profits. The CEO is always the last one to go. You know what I'm saying? The CEO, then it's like the CFO and the chief marketing officer and the COO. In those, when it comes to the C-suite, the first person to usually go is the chief marketing officer, because they're the easiest to blame. Because you know, the CEO, he's going to be the last one to go, and the CFO is more protected because they control the money. And then you have the operating officer, which typically they're not involved in the marketing stuff as much. So when you do a marketing campaign like what they did in January 2019, attacking the male consumer base of their product, which was just completely dumb, well, then they're going to be the ones to get their head chopped off when the numbers come in for the quarter. So what we have is, now that we have 2 quarters of information for Gillette, we come to find out that they had an $8 billion loss. So I bet you that CMO is going to be out of there. Whatever firms they hire to come out with this dumb, counterintuitive advertising that totally insulted their consumer base, their heads are going to roll. And I think you're seeing this in politics as well, that there's a lot of policies coming out now that are going against this radical feminism. And when I get deeper into the Brian Banks case, I'm going to talk about a law. Of course, everyone knows about the heartbeat bills that are being passed by a lot of the Republican-led states. That's spreading very fast. So we know that that case of Roe v. Wade is going to, you know, the heartbeat bill is created to undermine and abolish Roe v. Wade next year. So we already know that the Roe v. Wade case is going to be on the Supreme Court docket next year sometime. So that's coming. and it's an election year, so it's that's going to be huge. That case right there. So you have a lot of these things coming up, and I've been studying some of these laws that are fighting back against a lot of the misandry in America. So we're going to get to more of that with Brian Banks. So I just wanted to kind of like, give some news on some misandry that's kind of made the news recently. And Gillette was a case that many black men and many men in general were following, just because of the impact that it, when you put advertisement out here in America, people are going to like take it as facts. You know what I'm saying? They're going to take it as facts, unfortunately, but that's just the kind of climate that we live in now. We live in a climate where people have contracted out their thinking. They're walking around like zombies. And if you put it on television or social media, not so much television anymore, but more so social media, people will tend to like just take the word of whatever individual, group, or entity is making a statement instead of doing their research. It's fine to listen to information, but my thought is that don't take anything at face value. Always do your research and do a little bit more research before you're going to have a discussion on anything. So that's just something that I really do believe in. So I'm going to move on to this Brian Banks movie that's coming out. So I did post a link to the trailer of the Brian Banks movie, and I recommend that everyone go see that. Go ahead and take a moment to watch the trailer as I give you guys information about who Brian Banks was and how that relates to a lot of the history of black men in America. So I just want to take a minute to, shout out the viewers, shout out the chat. I'm very glad, that you guys are joining me for this conversation. What I want to do, since this is going to be the last hangout with Google Hangouts, I'm going to talk about the Brian Banks case, Lisa Borders of Time Out, and how it relates to Emmett Till. And then I'm going to, invite whoever wants to come on for an hour just to chop it up on this topic, because it's very timely. This Brian Banks movie, it's very timely as we enter this election year and we figure out ways to deal with a lot of the misandry out there. So when it comes to, talking about things like due process, because that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about the Brian Banks case and how he was accused of sodomy, rape, and kidnapping back in, I believe it was 2003. He was accused of sodomy and kidnapping and rape when he was in his the summer before his senior year of high school. And Brian Banks was a parade All-American at Long Beach Polytechnic. They produce a lot of NFL players. They produce, I think that almost all the starters for their team every year goes D1. All the starters on both sides, I believe, that's tremendous for the high school level. And he got himself caught up in something that turned his life around for the worse, and eventually he was exonerated. But I'll get into that a little bit later because the case is just so deep and interesting. But I just kind of wanted to just talk a little bit about due process and how important it is for the everyday black man to be up on his constitutional rights and to understand that there are 9 areas of human activity outside of just sex. Too often, we black men are labeled as just sex fiends and sex fetish and even sexual predators. And this ends up being used against us because that becomes like the symbol of the black man, something deviant. See, that's what the greater society and the black misandrous and others want to do. They want to make the symbol of black manhood sexual deviance. And that's why the origin of the believe all women goes back to Jim Crow and the black codes of the antebellum era. This is nothing new, right? So this whole campaign that the feminists of America are pushing and their male lackeys, because see, that's what I'm starting to understand as I see the pushback against radical feminism, is that it's a bi-gender campaign. So these radical feminists cannot do what they do without the help of male flunkies and male simps. that empower them. And on the flip side, to push back against this misandry, we're going to have to appeal to the interests of women. And what do I mean? Well, I'm going to talk about that more when I talk about Lisa Borders. See, what I'm finding out as I look at how men are being accused of things they didn't do on college campuses, in the workplace, often you're seeing the first pushback now coming from mothers, right? Mothers and wives. That situation with the guy over at Fox and his Asian wife, she was one of the, when that Me Too thing came out, she was one of the loudest voices in the room. Me too, me too. But when her husband got accused of all of those crimes, I think his name is like Les Moonves. I forgot the name of the woman. But I know that when Charlie Rose, he got accused as well. He has an Asian wife who is a reporter. They all circled the wagon for their husband. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. So when it's someone else's husband or someone else's son, these women are all about Me Too, convict, accuse, and destroy. But when it ends up being their son or their husband or their brother, now their reason kicks in. So what I'm learning is that with these women, you can't appeal to strictly reason with the females in general. You have to appeal to their feelings, their self-interest, then their reason as well. But it takes a combination, unfortunately. So what we see is that on these college campuses, a lot of the mothers of the men being accused are suing universities, right? So they're suing a lot of the colleges, and these colleges are getting taken to the cleaners. And that relates to Brian Banks, because in his case, the Long Beach Unified School System actually paid out to his accuser, which 10 years later, they come to find out that she lied about the whole thing. You can look her up. Her name is Juanetta Gibson. So he was a rising senior in his senior high school year, and she was going into her junior year of high school out there in Long Beach when she falsely accused him, and he ended up being convicted. But eventually, the Long Beach Unified School District ended up doing a settlement with her and her mother for $1.5 million. So I'm going to bring up her picture up, and we're going to talk about due process. So let me bring her picture up for you all to see who Juanetta Gibson is, this piece of shit, and her mother. I mean, these are people that represent pure evil, and why it's so important that we men stand on principles of due process. You can never, ever for a minute fall for the scam of believe all women. You believe no woman or no man when it comes to crimes. You are innocent until proven guilty. That must be the fundamental default that all U.S. citizens fall back to. A person is innocent until proven guilty. So this whole idea of believe all women is masterful propaganda. And then when something like the Brian Banks things happens, no one has anything to say. So let's take a look at Juanetta Gibson in her post-war years. So she would be about 32 years old now. And she's free as a bird right now as well. So hopefully you all can see, but here is a screenshot of Mr. Brian Banks, the former Parade All-American football player, who he is 34 years old now, and he was under the prison court system's control for a total, I believe, 11 years. So he did 6 years in prison and 5 years under like house arrest of some form before he finally was exonerated in 2012. But here's a picture of his accuser at her current age. So this is them now, but when it happened, she was about 16 and he was around 17 or 18. But this is her. So this is Miss Juanetta Gibson and Brian Banks, who the movie is based on. True story. And I mean, this just goes to show you, man, it's not even a race thing, because a lot of people, they get so caught up in the racial aspect that they forget this ain't even a race thing, man. Race, this is a misandry thing. So you can get got by any woman in America. And I want to really let people know that, like, don't ever think that just because a woman is black or white or Asian or mixed, whatever she happens to be, that's some kind of safety from black manhood in America. When you walk out the door, you are a black man. Now, you might be a different type of black man. You might be a rich black man, a short black man, a fat black man, a select black man, a non-select black man, whatever. But that's just the reality in America, that women get the benefit of the doubt and men get no benefits, and all the cost of everything society throws at them and any mistakes he might make. Even if he actually made a legitimate mistake himself, you're going to always, unless you just happen to be very rich and privileged, you're going to pay the price as a man to a higher degree than women are treated in society. Now, as a black man, that's going to be double, triple, or 10 times worse, possibly. But as a man, you're going to rarely get the benefit of the doubt. And you would have thought that in the case of Brian Banks, I mean, no criminal record, parade All-American, that he would have gotten even the benefit of the doubt. And that was what his public defender told him. See, what people don't understand about the Brian Banks case, he didn't go to trial. He took a plea bargain, right? And people be like, man, why would he take a plea bargain? He was a 17-year-old kid, and based on what I've read, he was in a single mother household, typical, right? We're at the point of 8 out of 10 black children are being raised by a single mother. So, all the information I could find, he was raised by a single mother. Nothing said anything about his father. I looked up a dozen articles. Everything talked about him and his mother, nothing about his father. So I'm assuming the father was not around until someone provides me with more information. So he ends up taking this plea deal. And for those that are familiar with the way that the American court systems work, I don't even use the term criminal justice system. The lawyers and the judges use that, and the politicians, because they're protecting their own self-interest. But I just call it the court system, because that's really what it is. But we know that 97% of all federal convictions come from pleas, not trials. And that 94 to 95% of convictions at the state level come from plea bargains and not trials, which would seem to be in direct contradiction of the U.S. Constitution and the Sixth Amendment, trial by jury. But because of the way that the American courts are set up, which is, to me, I feel that the American court system is more of a bank than about justice, than about administering justice. So to me, it's more about politicians creating more and more layers of laws, which leads to more and more ways of you violating a law. You see what I'm saying? See, you have to understand that America, for a first world, quote unquote, country, it incarcerates more people than Russia and China, I believe, even put together. So that's something to think about. America is supposed to be so civilized and so just and so orderly, but it incarcerates more of its citizens than any other civilized nation in the world. And then you look into it and you follow the money, you find out, because it's very profitable for politicians, lawyers, judges, and corporations or whatnot, to keep the incarceration rates very high. It's a very sick system that we have in America. And Brian Banks ended up being a victim of that sick system. So when you throw in the Jim Crow era kind of laws, because remember, the original believe all women was the motto of the segregationists and the anti-black male forces in America. So right now, they're all of a sudden, they're making as if this believe all women thing is a new idea in 2018 with the Me Too movement. No, it's not. Believe all women used to just mean believe all white women. So all they did was subtract white women from the motto and put believe all women now. So now any woman can accuse you black, as in this case, him being accused by an American black woman and her mother. So the only thing they did in 2018 with the Me Too movement was drop believe all white women, which was the code under the Jim Crow and the antebellum black codes. So it used to be believe all white women. because they didn't recognize the rights of black women at that time like that. So now it's believe all women. So any woman at any time can accuse you of anything. And then there's really no punishment from the courts and from the states. And we're going to talk about that a little bit as well, about how someone like a Juanita Gibson can be out here free as a damn bird right now in the state of California. She's free, even though she violated all of their laws: false reporting of a crime, perjury before the law. And luckily, some of the pro-masculine politicians are actually bringing bills to make it a serious felony for someone to do false rape accusations. Now, they weren't doing this in the interest of us men initially, right? But what happened is that an unintended consequence of the heartbeat bill was that because the only way that some of those states will allow abortion is going to be if you are raped, they had to add this addenda of making the false accusations a serious felony, because of course, if you pass a heartbeat bill and you tell women the only way that you can get an abortion in this state is if you accuse one of a rape, well, you're going to have millions of women around the country saying, I was raped, just to get an abortion. So they had to pass these adjoinders to those bills to protect the abortion thing that they were promoting. So it's interesting sometimes how the interest of one group and another group, even though they're not purposely trying to work together on something, end up working together. So because of the abortion bills that are being passed to abolish Roe v. Wade next year, they had to create a very high deterrence level laws to stop women from accusing men that they slept with through consent of rape, just so they can go get an abortion later. So what's going to happen is that this time next year, at least 32 of the states will have false rape accusation laws on the books. And one that I looked at in particular while researching the Brian Banks case was one in Alabama. And the one in Alabama, it's actually, the one in Alabama is actually passed by a House of Representative member down there in the state of Alabama by the name of Dickie Drake, and he represents Leeds, Alabama. So the bill that he passed would criminalize false rape accusations. He's a Republican, and the three major points of the bill is that it'll make false rape accusations a Class C felony, and it'll be up to 10 years in prison. This is serious, right? Like this is the strongest laws that we've seen in this nature. So with his law, you'll get up to 10 years in prison for falsely accusing someone of rape, and you'll also be liable for damages and attorney fees for if the person that you accuse is later found not guilty, not including the fact that you're also going to be liable for civil charges anyway. So this is one of the most strongest laws for deterrence that we've seen in a long time in America related to false rape accusations. So again, the Alabama law that is being passed right now in attachment with the heartbeat bill by Dickie Drake of Leeds, Alabama, representative, Class C felony, up to 10 years in prison, full damages and attorney fees on the accused. Now, there's probably going to be people listening like shocked that this has not been the law the whole time. But I'm sorry to tell you, but it has not been the law. In fact, attorney generals and prosecutors have always kind of just dropped the case. Once the person was found not guilty or they were exonerated of rape charges, they never really pursue the women, especially in the liberal states like California, New York, Illinois. So I'm having this conversation because for me, these digital spaces, this is what it's supposed to be for. Passing information to other men that they can go do their due diligence, they can do their own independent research and start to come to a conclusion of what it means to be a man in modern day Western society, and specifically America. So your life can be destroyed, completely destroyed by the mere accusation of sexual misconduct or inappropriate behavior overnight. Your job, your family, your freedom, property, everything taken from you over the mere accusation, while women in this country can get away with murder and false accusations and go live their life and do like Juanetta Gibson did. She got a $1.5 million settlement. Luckily, this exoneration happened before she got the second half of that. So she initially got $750,000. And you know that her and her mom, they burned through that very fast in that 10-year period. So she was due to get the second part of the money. But this exoneration happened, and the whole story with Brian Banks is insane, because he was exonerated because she tried to contact him on Facebook and request him as a damn friend after he got, so he's on house arrest. He's already done 6 years in the joint. He's been on house arrest for 5 years. And then this woman who was his accuser, now remember, she was 16 when she accused him, under her mom's guidance and her mother and her mother's attorney that she got for the juvenile girl. Even though she herself, Juanetta Gibson, claims that she told the attorney that she lied. She told the attorney back then that she lied, that she was lying when they were doing the settlement. But her attorney and her mother got so greedy for that 1.5 million, because, you know, usually attorneys get like, what, I think 30% of settlements, in some cases up to 30%. So he was trying to get that bag. He wanted to get his cut, which would have been around like what, $300,000, $400,000. So her attorney that represented her in the lawsuit against Long Beach Unified District Schools, even though Juanetta claims that she told the attorney that she was lying, he said, just shut up and get this money. And her mom told her, listen to the attorney, we're going to get this paycheck off of this parade All-American football player. And we don't care about sacrificing him because he's nothing but a black male. We don't care if he was scheduled to go to USC with Reggie Bush. We don't care that he would have been on the USC Trojans championship team in 2004 as a star linebacker. We don't care that he would have been a first round to second round NFL draft pick. None of that shit is relevant. But we're going to return to Miss Juanetta in a moment. So, you know, going back to due process, man. So for you all that are not aware of where our due process protections come from, they come from the Fifth Amendment, which was ratified with the original Bill of Rights in 1791, and the 14th Amendment. So I'm not going to read the 14th Amendment, but I'm just going to read the Fifth Amendment because it's pretty short. So the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution, ratified in 1791, says, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Now here's the most important part, this second clause. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or liberty, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. So that part in the Fifth Amendment where it says, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. That is critical, because that's the linchpin upon which the Me Too movement should be abolished and destroyed by reasoning people. Due process is there to protect our life, liberty, and property from the mere accusations. And that's what we have. That's why due process is so fundamental. And in this case, you got a 17-year-old teenager, single mother home, according to the news, probably broke. They can't afford a big time attorney like Lisa Borders of the Time's Up Now movement when her son was accused. I can't wait to tie her into this whole thing. See, this is one of the outcomes of these single mother fatherless households. There's no wealth. Single mothers are the most impoverished in America. They have the worst outcomes for their children. So something like this happens, and no one in America needs more protection than black boys that will become black men. They need the most protection in this country because they are the most marginalized, the most alienated, and the most envied in society. So when a Brian Banks gets accused of something like this, he has to get a public defender. He's only 17-year-old, and he don't know nothing. He knows nothing. All he knows is football. His mama don't know nothing. She's not a lawyer. She's not a banker. She's not an engineer. She don't have clout like that. So she's going to have to take the word of the attorney. And based on Brian Banks' own words, the public defender or the attorney that was given to him told him, take the plea deal because you're facing 41 years in prison for sodomy, kidnapping, and rape. And we'll get you a deal where you'll become a registered sex offender. You'll do 6 years in prison and you'll do 5 additional years on strict house arrest, right? So that's the deal he has to take. His deal never went before a jury because what do you do in that situation? A person that's in a single mother home, your mother is broke, you are a teenager, you don't got no money to get a big time attorney to represent you like Kevin Spacey can, or like a Weinstein can, or like Charlie Rose and all these other people can. They got the clout and the capital to get an attorney to represent them. You see what I'm saying? So you're facing 41 years versus you taking 6 years prison, sex offender registry, and 5 years of on-house probation. I mean, and you know you're innocent. That's the part that is so unfortunate and sad about the Brian Banks case. The man was completely innocent. So he took the plea deal. And plea deals are very, very hard to unravel once there's potential evidence that someone lied. So if there's evidence that the accuser lied, the threshold by which states hold a plea bargain conviction versus a jury conviction is much stricter and harder. So if he had went to trial and been convicted of the 41 years, and he had in this situation that came along where the woman admitted that she lied, then it would have been a much quicker process for exonerating him. But because he took a plea bargain, which weighs, all your constitutional rights, it's such a more difficult situation because you're dealing with prosecutors. You admitted that you were guilty. And, these prosecutors, they hate when a case that, this is bad publicity for them. When they have a case like this, to this kind of notoriety, and they were wrong, it's bad publicity for them. And remember, in many states, the prosecutorial lane and the attorney general lane are usually pathways to greater politics, in particular, becoming governor of your state or becoming a senator. Like, you had a situation with top cop Kamala Harris, who was a prosecutor and attorney general. And this was actually in her state. So that has a whole nother connection as well. Her coming from the state of California, her being an attorney general. So prosecutors often have political ambitions. And these kind of cases, even if they find out themselves that they're wrong, they will actually try to bury these kind of cases and say, let that person rot in prison because I have political ambitions. Luckily for Brian Banks, he was dealing with a new administration and in the prosecutorial office, from what I understand, and they worked with his defense team, which was actually the California Innocent Project, that helped him to get exonerated. So he was saying, and his attorneys were saying, that they actually worked with him, which is rare because often in these cases, the prosecutors will try to seal the case. And because they have the power to do so, they often can do so without any problem. So you'll just be sitting there rotting in prison, even though the accuser has come forward and admitted that they lied. They still, in some cases, won't let you out. So we're talking about a court system that has so many flaws and so much corruption. And when you start needling away and starting to make it as if due process is a bad thing, then you're going to have more and more outcomes like the Brian Banks. So I'm demanding that you black men and other men, that you start to put your foot down and say, no, no further and start to push back strongly with your voice, with your dollars, and with your vote, because that's all you got. Your voice, your dollars, and your vote. So that's how you start to push back. Don't let this country cuckold you and put a skirt on you, and then we all end up like Brian Banks one day. Any of us could be Brian Banks, man. This man was innocent. Any of us could be Brian Banks. Wrong place at the wrong time at work. Wrong place, wrong time on a bad date, like Aziz Ansari ended up. You could just be with a woman and the shit goes bad because you won't do what she demands, and now she could blackmail you with your freedom, for your money, for your property. So I'm gonna pause for a moment, take a look at the chat, because I can never look at the chat when the screen share is up. Let me see what you guys have to say about so far. What's up, MOT? Lando. Trick Lessons in the house. Tyrone Church. Richard Victor Dixon. Let's Be Frank. Ifan. Just all of the brothers, man. Thanks for coming through. I'm going to go for about another 30 minutes, and then I'm going to invite you guys on the panel because I know that y'all going to have a whole lot to say, but I want to introduce a little bit more about the Brian Banks case and how it relates to Lisa Borders and Emmett Till. So I just want to take a break and check the chat for a minute because I like to hear what you guys are saying. And then I'll go for like another 30 minutes, and then I will invite anyone that wants to come on and talk about this because this is a very important case to talk about. I will post a link for the Alabama law. I got to go find that one. So Abdullah, when I actually invite you on the panel, please repost your question because in the meantime, you could easily look author of the bill in Alabama. Let me see what his name was again. Damn. So the guy's name in Alabama, his name is Drake. He's a House of Representatives in Alabama, for Leeds, Alabama. His name is Dickie Drake. And so it's the false accusation of rape bill. So you can find that one. So that should be a bill that every black male in particular, that you know these kind of things, and that YouTube, that's the only way we're going to change things, with our voice, our dollars, and our vote. So you all go look up that bill in Alabama, because that should be a law in every state, up to 10 years in prison for false accusation, Class C felony, full damages, and also the civil suit that you would have to, that these accused would have to pay. When these women understand that they will do the same kind of time as the person they're accusing of, they ain't gonna be out here making these kind of false accusations. They're doing it because society is telling them there is no punishment for you. You can do whatever the hell you want to do. So the man has to be treated as an adult in all ways. And if you're a black man, your adulthood begins when you have your first wet dream, according to the laws of this country, historically and now. So the woman, she could be 40 years old, but she's treated like a child. That's why when these women rape boys at the schools, they could be 30, 40, 50, whatever, they get a slap on the wrist. But the man did something like that, just be accused of it, he's going to do 10 years in prison. At what point do you men put your foot down? At what point do you grow some nuts? When do you grow a pair, bro? I mean, seriously, at this point. And this Brian Banks movie, this is great. This is good that Hollywood would take on something like, because usually they will suppress this kind of story and never let it get the light of day. So now that it does have the light of day, it's on us to push these kind of things out there for everyone to know about. At what point do you stop worrying about these rappers being arrested in other countries? Rappers being interviewed by politicians? That is a game. They got you so far off in bread and circuses and chasing celebrity clout that you don't even know what your interest is no more. All they got to do is put a celebrity on TV. No other group has celebrities as their spokespeople but the American black man. Our spokespeople is not doctors, engineers, lawyers, and people that have the knowledge of these things and that are pro-masculinists. But our spokesman got to be a fucking comedian, a stripper, whatever they want to choose for the day. And at what point do you guys start taking responsibility? I'm taking responsibility by using my voice for something that is going to help black men in their pursuit of their own happiness. So let me bring back up old girl. So yeah, that's Brian Banks, and that's his accuser, Juanita Gibson. So I'm gonna dig a little bit deeper into who Brian Banks was, because his story is actually pretty amazing, because how a lot of us are into sports, and his story connects to a lot of NFL players and a lot of woulda, coulda, shoulda. So basically, Brian Banks is 35 years old now, and he played at Long Beach Polytechnic, and he was set to graduate in 2003, right? So he had committed to USC, the University of Southern California. Now remember, at that time, the Trojans had just won a national championship. That's when they had Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush. I think he was a freshman that year. And I believe Reggie Bush will go on to win the Heisman the next year as a sophomore. So Brian Banks was a parade All-American. That means that he was one of the top 24 players in the country as a junior in high school. And he was just a junior. He was a 6'3", 250-pound linebacker. I mean, that's NFL size as a damn rising senior in high school. This dude was only 17. He was already 6'3", 250. NFL size, playing for one of the top high schools in the country. Matter of fact, doing some research, I found out he played with Deshaun Jackson. He was on the team at the time. Deshaun Jackson was one of the top wide receivers in high school. He played at Long Beach Poly. And he went on to go to University of California to play for the Philadelphia Eagles and the Buccaneers. And I think now Deshaun Jackson is playing for the Eagles again. But he's so we're doing a timeline here to get to the meat of what happened to this man. So you sitting here in the prison cell, and when you watching your former teammates having so much fun, rocking out on TV in D1 college, Pac-10, national champions. You watching your former teammate Deshaun Jackson lighting them up. And here you are sitting in a prison cell because of a lying whore. A lying whore. So eventually, after he was exonerated, he was about 28 years old. So he would go on to get signed to the Atlanta Falcons practice squad for one season. So, but the NFL is a very short-lived career. A lot of people call the NFL not for long. So the careers of NFL players are very short and they peak very quickly, right? So baseball tends to have the longest careers, then basketball after that, and then football is the shortest careers. I think the average NFL career is like 3 years, right? So if you're going to try out for the NFL after being in prison for 10 years and you're a 28-year-old man, I mean, that shows how naturally gifted this man was at football. This man was so naturally gifted at football that even after 10 years under California penal system, incarceration, and strict probation, he still was able to make it on an NFL practice squad. He only made it for one season, but that just shows how much talent this man had. And if he had went straight from high school, got to play his senior year, played at USC, we can pretty much do a simulation of where he would be at as a 35-year-old man. Usually the best NFL players, the all-pros, they retire around 34, 35. Those are the all-pros, the Hall of Famers. So Deshaun Jackson is still playing in the NFL. He's about 35, 36. So that tells you where Brian Banks, he would have been at the end of a very stellar NFL career, most likely. So he was convicted at 17 years old. He was going to graduate in 2003. So he would have been in the USC's recruiting class after Reggie Bush, playing for Pete Carroll. So to give you an example of how good of an athlete he was, the year that he was a parade All-American, Adrian Peterson, the future Hall of Fame running back for the Vikings and the Washington Redskins, was in his class. Okay? He was on the Adrian Peterson was on the offensive side of the ball as a parade All-American out of Texas. Brian Banks on the defensive side of the ball as a parade All-American. Another good player from that 2003, what would have been a 2003 parade All-American class was Ted Ginn Jr. Ted Ginn ended up going on to play at Ohio State. He was never a Hall of Fame receiver, but he was a fast receiver that can catch a couple balls. He drops a lot of passes, but he ran like a 4.2. So Ted Ginn is actually still playing in the NFL just off his speed right now. These were two players that was in the parade All-American class with Brian Banks. So you know the level of athleticism we're talking about here. What was taken away from this man by a lying whore. So think about it. So we continue the simulation. Brian Banks, if he had gone on to play his senior year, he would have been playing on USC's championship team in 2004 because USC won back-to-back championships, 2003, 2004, under Pete Carroll. And Matt Leinart, the QB, and Reggie Bush were going both to win the Heisman. So during his time that he would have been in college, he would have got at least one championship. Shit, they may have gotten another one if he would have been on the team. So let's think about, okay, so had he played his career out at USC, we know that he would have won at least one NFL championship. Now, let's say that he would have gotten drafted in the first to second or third round, because based on his parade All-American status, we can predict that he would have been at least the top, either if not the top first round pick, he would have been in the first 3 rounds based on what his statistics look like in high school. Now, so I'm doing the data check on that. So if he would have came out his junior year in 2006 at USC, there were 31 linebackers taken in the NFL draft that year. The first linebacker taken that year was A.J. Hawk. He was the 5th pick in the first round out of Ohio State. Brian Banks was a much better athlete and higher ranked than A.J. Hawk going into his senior year. That's how good he was. He was ranked higher than A.J. Hawk coming out of high school. Way more athletic, same kind of strength, way more agility, way more awareness. So if A.J. Hawk was the 5th pick, the first linebacker picked in 2006 at number 5, and guess what his salary was? His rookie contract, A.J. Hawk, who Brian Banks was better than, was $37 million, okay? $37 million rookie contract A.J. Hawk got from the Green Bay Packers as the 5th pick in the first round. So we can at a minimum say that Brian Banks potentially lost at least $37 million. He would have came out in 2006. If he would have came out his senior year in 2007, there were 33 linebackers drafted into the NFL that year. The first linebacker was taken in the first round with the 11th pick with the 49ers, Patrick Willis out of Ole Miss. Brian Banks was ranked higher than A.J. Hawk and Patrick Willis as a junior in high school. So at a minimum, we know that if Brian Banks had had an opportunity to pursue his happiness and not had his freedom taken to him by lying lawyers, greedy women, and a corrupt court system, he would have been in line to make at least $17 to $37 million on a rookie contract. We're not even going to go into if he played for 10 years. We're just going to say he got a rookie contract and played at least 3 years. So he lost at least a minimum of $17 to $37 million because of the lies that was allowed against him by the California courts. One of the worst states in America, a state that borders on treason with every law they pass. The state of California is so poorly run, that state literally borders, they're almost a treasonous country at this point. I wouldn't be surprised if 10 years from now, California is trying to become a part of Mexico or something, trying to secede to become a part of a second world country. I wouldn't be surprised at this point with California. It's one of the most poorly ran, corrupt states in America right now. It really is. So basically, the charges were dismissed against Brian Banks on May 24th, 2012, just before his 28th birthday. And he was convicted of rape, sodomy, and kidnapping, man. And this Juanita Gibson character, man, the accuser, who is a liar. She lied. She broke all the laws of California. In California, the laws for perjury, so I had to look that up as well. So in California, perjury is a felony. It's actually a felony in California. It is. And it's punishable up to 4 years in jail. And you can look that up. It's California Penal Code section 118 through 131. Perjury is a felony in California. Yet this woman is walking free right now. And she got half of her $1.5 million payment in a first lump sum, in a first installment or whatnot. Luckily, she didn't get the second half. And a false report in California is an additional misdemeanor, up to 6 months in prison. So at a minimum, this Juanetta Gibson, liar, bad, evil human being, she should have been convicted of perjury and false reporting under California Penal Code section 118 to 131 and false reporting California Penal Code 148.5. But yes, she's free because of the way that these misandric laws have been structured and the way that they perceive rape in America and sexual misconduct. You men that call yourself male feminists, you simps that cape for the gynocentric state, you deserve anything that you get from the gynocentric state. And I hope that you get your karma the way that Al Franken got his karma, the way that people like Lisa Borders got her karma, and the way that some of you, the comedian Aziz Ansari got his karma. You caping for a system that will eat you alive and discard you and spit out your bones with no problems. When you put on a cape of male feminism and simphood, you're going to get yours eventually. See, when your day comes, when you find yourself before the gynocentric firing squad, you're going to regret every time that you simped, every time you cape for things that you knew in your heart were wrong and against men, just so that you can get a whiff of attention and female validation. And then the irony is that while you doing all that, you still not going to fuck, because she's going to go fuck that dark triad man that she thinks is a degenerate deviant anyways. That's the irony. So blood is on your hands, right? Blood is on my hands because we're Americans and we live in a republic. And in a republic, majority rules. That's how it works. So if a majority makes a law and you're in a minority, you have to accept the consequences of the ruling of the majority. And in the state of California, this is what the majority has decided. Men are going to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Women will not be prosecuted, or at max will just get a slap on the wrist. This woman should have been in jail for perjury and false reporting. She should be in prison right now doing 4 years and making restitution payments to Brian Banks for the rest of her life, and her mother and the lawyer that represented her that lied, knowing that she was lying. He should be disbarred and buried underneath the prison, because for an attorney, the threshold should be even higher. For you to tell your client to lie so you can get that $300,000 cash, you should be disbarred. You should be put in prison for twice the amount of time as her. That's my opinion on that. But I don't live in California, luckily. But blood is all on all of our hands when they send innocent people and innocent men to prison on false accusations. And we just sit back and do nothing. So at a minimum, I can say I made my voice heard, and I'm going to make my dollars count, and I'm going to make my vote count in 2020. It's no way in hell I will see a feminist and an anti-male candidate get my vote or get my validation. Never. It ain't going to happen. You can tell me whatever you want to tell me. So, in regards to Juanita Gibson's payout from Long Beach Unified School District, they ended up countersuing her after his exoneration. So what happened is that on August 12, 2013, the Long Beach Unified School District announced it was suing Juanita Gibson for $2 million to try to recoup the money that she got in the $1.5 million settlement. Because remember, they did an installment plan. So she got half of it up front, and she was going to get the other half, I guess, around 2011 or so. But this exoneration happened, so they were able to keep $750,000. But think about that for a minute. We're not talking about a university. We're not talking about a corporation. We're talking about a public school system that, because of a liar, an evil human being, paid out $750,000 cash to this lying whore. That means that children of these same single mother kind of households didn't get computers, didn't get new supplies. Teachers didn't get raises. School maintenance and upkeep didn't happen because of this lying whore. We're talking about a public school, and from what I understand, Long Beach ain't a very rich area of California at that. But yet they had to pay this whore $750,000. This lying, evil succubus. Her and her mother and the lawyer, all in a conspiracy of evil lies to destroy one man's life so they can get paid. Never believe anybody when it comes to the law. You are innocent until proven guilty, so believe no woman. Hashtag believe no woman until proven that she is telling the truth in a court of law by a jury of their peers. Any laws that are made to undermine due process are treasonous and unconstitutional. And the kind of people that are trying to pass these kind of laws should be taken out and shot by a firing squad because they're destroying lives on purpose. This is evil, man. Destroying lives on purpose. We have a treasonous element in our country right now. And I don't use the word treason lightly. I'm talking about people that will live to undermine the constitutional rights of others and the Constitution of this nation. They don't care about constitutional rights. They don't care about the Constitution. They don't care about humanity itself. All they care about is their selfish goals and needs. That's it. And no civilization and no society based on a constitution operates like that or can operate like that and call itself a constitutional republic. So this woman is literally walking around. So they won the case. So what happened is that the district ended up winning their counter lawsuit for an amount of $2.6 million against Gibson. But it's almost a meaningless, it's like a symbolic victory. This woman don't got no money. You know what I'm saying? She's a 33-year-old loser. Sexual marketplace loser. Economic loser. She only won at being a criminal that got away. That's what she won at. Her only thing she ever won at life was becoming a successful criminal. She was temporarily a successful criminal because that man can never get back those 10 years of his life. He can never get back the $17 to $40 million minimum that was taken from that man. So she won at destroying another black person. This is a black American woman, a black American mother that destroyed a young black man for their own selfish goods. We are disposable in black America as black men. And we already know the dominant society don't care about us. But you would think that a little bit of love, a little bit of humanity will be left in black America for black men and black boys. They don't even have any empathy for us anymore. So it's on us to have empathy for each other and ourselves. We are the ones that have to practice the most self-love, black men. Because society does not fuck with us. It wants to see us in a coffin or in a dress or in prison pinstripes. I'll say it again. And for all you black male haters out there, go ahead and comment. Let me know what you think. But this country only wants to see you in prison stripes, in a coffin, or in a damn dress if you are a black male in 2019. How you dudes can be out there caping for women that hate you, I don't even understand it. I don't know. So luckily in the case of the Long Beach Unified School District, they canceled the second payment that was going to go to this lying whore and her mother and that attorney. This is the outcomes when you believe all women. This is the outcome when you put the succubus in charge of anything. This is the outcome when you take the word of a succubus. That's like a contradiction to take the word of a succubus, man. Think about that for a second. But what really hurts me is the fact that there are black boys and black girls in the Long Beach Unified School District that did not get the supplies they needed, did not get the new desks they needed. They were $750,000 was taken from what should have went to students, given to this woman. Who knows what her and her mother did with that money and the attorney? We don't know what they did with their money, but she was broke by the time that they came back and won the $2.6 million lawsuit against her. But yet, even with that lawsuit, like I said, it's a symbolic victory. They're not gonna ever get no money. She don't got no job. She can't pay it. She's in bankruptcy. This will probably be discharged in bankruptcy because she don't have nothing. She don't have no assets. She's nothing. She's a loser. A loser. And she destroyed a winner's life. Brian Banks was a champion. A champion on the field. Scholar athlete. He was a winner. And he had it all taken away by a succubus. So one of the things that I thought was interesting about looking at some of the information about the trial, they said that she had claimed initially that that summer that he actually dragged her into so she had this elaborate story. You know, they always got like an elaborate story when they want to accuse you, take away your liberty and your future. They come up with these elaborate Salem witch trial type stories, right? So she said that, oh, he dragged me like a barbarian because, you know, you got to do, this dude is 6'3", 250, all pro linebacker, and you got a woman. And the way she described it to them was like, he dragged me into the stairway. I couldn't resist his almighty brute force. And then he raped me and sodomized me. That's what she told these people, man. That's the story that she went to the principal of the high school, the principal of the high school, the law enforcement, the judge and the lawyer. This is the story she told them, man. This big black brute dragged me into the stairwell of my high school, raped me and sodomized me. And it was all a fucking lie, man. And then we got hashtag believe all women out here. When there's been whole black towns burned down because of the word of white women, Rosewood burned down because of a white woman getting beaten by a white man. Then she went out and said a black man raped. They burned down the whole town and killed. They don't even know how many people was really killed. They give a conservative number of 100 or whatever, but it's probably thousands that was killed in Rosewood. Burned the whole fucking town down. Black Wall Street. Believe all white women, the original standard for these messengers. A black man in a fucking elevator doing his job. His job was working the elevator. The elevator jerks. They say his elbow just touched her. She runs out talking about rape. That was a lie. Whole fucking town is burned down. People are killed and assaulted and put in jail. Thousands are buried out there in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They ain't never did a full study of how many people was actually killed. The governor bombed them. That was the Democratic Party, which is ironic. Come to find out, KKK Democrats actually destroyed Black Wall Street, bombed and killed all those people, all over believe all white women. And then we come to Emmett Till and how this all connects to the Brian Banks because it has its origin in believe all white women. Emmett Till, 14-year-old kid, family from Mississippi, that moved up to his mom that moved up to Chicago, like many of us families moved from Mississippi to Chicago, Detroit, Indianapolis, whatnot. Goes down to Money, Mississippi to visit his granduncle. Finds himself in a store, a grocery store, owned by a white couple. Now, this woman, her name was Carolyn Bryant. Carolyn Bryant, the reason this story connects in so many ways is that Carolyn Bryant, on her deathbed, she admitted to the mainstream media that she lied. She made up the whole story about him grabbing her and whistling all this shit. Because remember, in the case of Emmett Till back in 1955, so the story was that he was in the grocery store of this white married couple. The white man, the husband name was Roy Bryant. And the wife, her name was Carolyn Bryant. This happened in Money, Mississippi, near the Tallahatchie River down there in Mississippi. And so he's in the grocery store visiting his uncle for the summer. He's going to get some candy or whatever, 14-year-old kid. So she had told the story that Emmett Till grabbed her, then was making like obscene, like calling her bitch, you know, things like that. Bitch, you're going to let me touch you. That's what she claimed that Emmett Till did. Well, we all know the outcome of what happened to Emmett Till, how her husband, Roy Bryant, and his buddy, J.W. Milam, came at gunpoint and kidnapped him from his granduncle's home. And there's nothing he could do. It ain't nothing his granduncle could do but die, because that's the way that Jim Crow laws were set up in 1955. White people could get away with these kind of things. So they dragged this 14-year-old teenager, shot his body up, beat his body to a point that you can't even recognize it. You can all go search the pictures. And then wrapped like some kind of engine device that they tied around his body with barbed wire. They didn't already shot up the body. First they beat him to a bloody pulp, so he was already dead from the beating. Then they just shot his body up with who knows how many bullets. Then they tied an engine fan thing around his body and dumped him in the fucking Tallahatchie River. This was one of the things that these are one of the sparks of the civil rights movement. So you would have the Rosa Parks bus boycotts and all that came along. You had the Emmett Till, because one of the things that was unique about Emmett Till is that his mother refused to do a closed casket funeral. And this thing was showed to the whole world, the racial terrorism and the brutality of being a black boy or a black man at that time. So this is a long history of this believe all white women thing, because that's where this all came from. So what's so sad about the case of Emmett Till is that on her deathbed, and I guess she would have been like in her 70s or 80s at this time, she was interviewed on 60 Minutes and the New York Times and all this. Carolyn Bryant admitted that she lied about the whole thing. And you just ask her, why? You just lying just to lie. This is what a lot of these women do. They just make up shit because something didn't go their way or they had a bad day or whatever. That's enough for them to destroy lives. And I'm supposed to get behind believe all women? Are you insane? The only hashtag I want to see is due process before and for all. Due process for all until the lights go out. That's the hashtag I want to see. Due process for all until the lights go out. But these are the kind of treasonous individuals, the kind of lunatics that we have that have the voice, that have the money behind them, and that are giving platforms. But we have to use what we got. David only had a rock, and it was enough. This is all we got. But we're going to use it to destroy these myths and deconstruct the lies that's damaging and destroying lives, man. So, yeah, that was the situation with Emmett Till. The woman on her deathbed, after she done destroyed these lives, she comes out and says, oh, I lied about the whole thing. So this is what you're dealing with when you're talking about believe all women. Now, I want to close out the conversation about Brian Banks because, you know, that's basically what happened. His NFL career was destroyed. Now there's a movie out about it. He was exonerated in 2012. The woman is still free. And he'll never get those years back. He'll never recover that money. But he can do the best to use his life as an example of how these kind of laws that protect these liars, these felonious liars, these women that should be found guilty of false reporting and perjury, we should all be getting behind the bills like the one in Alabama that specifically target false rape accusers and gives them double penalties. Because think about it. The false report penalty is only 6 months, misdemeanor. The perjury is a felony, but up to 4 years. And we know they give women less sentences. So on average, the woman might get a year house arrest and then like 4 years probation. But under the Alabama law, you're looking at up to 10 years and a Class C felony and full punitive damages. So that's what I'm putting out here in the zeitgeist. You men should be getting behind laws that give punishment to these false accusers, because one day your ass might be Brian Banks. And don't say it can't happen to you, because it happened to him and he was on top of the world. It can happen to any man under these kind of laws. So I kind of wanted to segue to Lisa Borders, and I will just invite anyone that want to come on the panel and chop it up for an hour or so about what I've been talking about, because this is deep stuff that affects us all. And some of you got young black boys, and you may end up in this situation when your son is a high school All-American and he is exploring his sexuality with young women and ends up in a situation like this falsely just because she didn't get what she wanted out of the deal. So some of you may be familiar with Lisa Borders, but Lisa Border connects to this whole thing in such a dramatic way. You know, I'm gonna bring up Lisa Borders for you guys, man. The situation is comedy. So let's see. Gotta bring up this Lisa Borders stuff. I know I have a little bit of buffering, but hopefully you guys can hear me. Just like the computer was doing a little bit of buffering, so I need to close some of these screens. So I'm trying to bring up this Lisa Borders. I had some buffering issues. I had to close some screens, but hopefully everything is still cool. I got to check in on you guys in the chat real quick, but just give me a second. All right, so I'm going to bring up the screen with Lisa Borders because I want you guys to see this woman. Her case is very interesting to me. What happened with her and her son, and how it was. I mean, just the irony when they talk about the chickens coming home to roost, and be careful what kind of karma that you put out there, because you might end up like Lisa Borders. So let's talk about who Lisa Borders is and why she's significant. So Lisa Borders, she's an American Black woman. She's currently 61 years old, and she was the other side of Tarana Burke's Me Too coin. So for all you people who have followed the Me Too movement since around 2007, 2018, when it arose to prominence and it was putting these accusers on the front of Time magazine, except for Tarana Burke, the other side of the Me Too movement from an organizational standpoint was a movement created by Hollywood celebrities called Time's Out. So Time's Out was the legal defense arm of the Me Too movement. So Me Too was more of the advocacy, digital advocacy, marches, and all of that kind of stuff that you were seeing in the media. The marches, a lot of that was organized by the Me Too movement. But the legal aspect of the legal fund part of it was called Time's Up. And this was funds that they got from Hollywood actors, directors, or whatever. In particular, what stood out to me was the fact that Mark Wahlberg had donated like $1.5 to $2 million to the Time's Out legal fund. Now, remember, this is a legal fund that goes after men potentially falsely accused of rape, sexual misconduct, or sexual assaults, or even just looking at a woman the wrong way. Yet someone like a Mark Wahlberg, who I guess he fancies himself a male feminist, donated up to $2 million to this fund. So Lisa Borders has a very strong resume, right? So Lisa Borders is a graduate of Duke University, and I believe she got a master's from like Colorado University or somewhere. And the main mission of Time's Up is pursuing sexual assault convictions against men, because I haven't heard of them pursuing any men that were accusing women. Matter of fact, one of the women that was big face of Time's Up, she was accused of raping a young man. She was the girlfriend of Anthony Bourdain. I can't think of her name right now, but the girlfriend of Anthony Bourdain, she was like the main face of Time's Up part of it, the legal defense part. Oh, we got to go sue these guys or whatever. She ended up being accused herself of doing a grooming process of molesting a young man through his teenage years. And she quickly was shoved aside and dropped from public view. So I didn't hear them going after women like that. So basically, it's an attempt to go after men that have been accused of false rape or whatever, sexual misconduct, and that have money. So it's really a cash grab. So let's be honest. The Me Too movement and its legal arm, Time's Up, are cash grabs to go accuse rich men and to get their assets and transfer them to women and the interest of women in these organizations. That's basically what it boils down to. So Lisa Borders, being a Black feminist, she was one of these rah Black feminist cheerleaders. She became the CEO of Time's Up because, of course, at that time, Me Too was having a lot of racial issues between Black women and white women and other women against the white woman. So they had all this issues going on between the different races of women last year in regards to policy and leadership of the Me Too movement and the Time's Up movement. So, of course, they went and found a Black woman to put as the CEO. Oh, we ain't racist. We got a Black woman in charge. So she takes the job. Time's Up was organized on January 1st, 2018 as a nonprofit organization, legal defense fund or whatever. And they picked her as the first CEO in 2018. Well, unfortunately for Lisa Borders and her son, he's a podcaster and a yoga instructor, 36-year-old Black man. He's a Black male living out in San Francisco. And he was saying that he was mostly raised just by her. His father was absent from his life. So again, he's a product of a single mother home. He was saying that his mom was too busy doing her career to raise him. So he was a latchkey kid and she was busy pursuing her career, as a lot of women have done in that generation of women from the older, the younger baby boomers and the older Gen X women. That's what they were focused on, their career, not their kids. So he is out here in California while his mom is out here pursuing all these feminist activities. He's out here, he's a yoga instructor. And he did like a private session out there in California with a yoga instructor. She's a woman named what was her name? Celia Gellert. That's her name. Now this case is currently ongoing. So it just happened back in February. So he was accused of sexual misconduct and sexual assault by another yoga instructor out in Santa Monica named Celia Gellert. Now here's the irony. So the moment that this case hit, now there's a conflict of interest for Lisa Borders because her whole organization is meant to convict men like her son, who she herself believes is falsely accused. Now think about the irony of that. She's out here convicting other men and raising legal defense money to convict other men like Brian Banks, like her son. But the moment her own son was accused of sexual conduct, she believes that he's innocent. So because of that, she ends up dropping and resigning from Time's Up after being on the job for only 4 months. And they've replaced her now, I believe, but they were doing a search for a replacement. But she ends up dropping and resigning from Time's Up so that she could defend her son. Now, this is the difference between a Brian Banks and being the son of Lisa Borders when falsely accused of a crime. Guess who she got to be a lawyer for her son that is currently representing her son in his sexual assault case? The attorney for Kevin Spacey. Ain't that something? Isn't that interesting? So she has enough clout and enough money that she can get one of the top attorneys in California to represent her son, who is in an ongoing legal dispute right now. And if he's guilty, he could end up being the next Brian Banks. So she ended up quitting that job. And, you know, this woman accused her son. His name is Gary Bowden Jr. And so the female yoga instructor said that, like, they were doing a private session, practicing different techniques or whatever. And I guess the homeboy got a little bit sexually excited, she claims, and was rubbing his self up against her. And I guess, you know, that's kind of what they do in these massage sessions. Now, in his defense, his attorney says that he has a text message from the accuser, Celia Gellert, saying that she enjoyed the session. It was one of her favorite sessions. See, this is what happens with this accusation culture. So he has a text that is going to be provided to the court that shows that she had no complaints after the session. In fact, she was, the way it read is almost like a sext. Like he was doing sexual things, she claims, but then she sent him a text saying that she liked the session. So her son is currently on trial, going to trial, preparing for trial for sexual assault on a yoga instructor. And that's why I was saying earlier that it seems like what it takes for these women to wake up from this gender bias hypnosis of the radical feminists is when their own sons start becoming a victim. Because I suspect that the most virulent radical feminists are those that don't even have children. They're women that are the biggest man haters, possibly lesbians, and most likely don't have children of their own. They are the ones that are leading these other women down a road that's going to destroy everything that the family represents if they get their way. So I'm going to just go ahead and close it out with that. You guys can look at the links that I put in the chat. I'm going to open up the panel, see if anyone wants to come on, because I haven't had a chance to look at the chat when I'm doing these screen shares. So let me see what you guys are saying. Okay, yeah, that was Anthony Bourdain, the woman that they say potentially might have, some even said that she might have killed him. There's been some people saying that it's possible that Asia Argento, and there was also kind of conspiracy. That's only an allegation that's out there about this Asia Argento. She was into some weird shit. If you look into her, she was in like a lot of satanic witchcraft type shit. So I don't know, but the man is dead, and she was in molesting some young man that brought some kind of case against her recently. I haven't followed it, but she was the face of Time Out and Me Too at that time. But then the management of the movement, they have a little civil war going on right now, and general society is turning against them as well. So we'll see how that turns out. But it's interesting that happened to her, man, to Lisa Borders, because she was one of the biggest feminist advocates out there until her own son ended up. So if anyone want to come on, man, let me know. Because I'm gonna open up the panel for this last hour. So let me see if is there anyone currently in the chat that wants to come on and have something to say? I don't know if you're at work right now, Sir Tricks, but there's a lot of shit that's been going on out there in California in terms of their misandry laws. So I definitely, if you got time, I'd like to hear your opinion on some of this stuff. Just let me know. Oh yeah, Supreme King Coon. Yeah, they definitely swept that Asia Argento thing under the rug, and that's just what they do, man. They, when something like that happens, and it shows the female side of the fuckery, they always gonna sweep it under the rug. But it's on us men out here to start pushing back completely. I mean, like unapologetically pushing back. I'm down. Like I said, I'm willing to give my voice, and I'm gonna, keep my dollars in my pocket, and I'm gonna keep my vote for only someone that meets the kind of agenda that I believe that's a pro-masculinist agenda and a pro-black male agenda. Outside of that, I'm pulling out. You know what I'm saying? Pool your dollars. Like I said earlier with the case of Gillette. Gillette had to learn the hard way, an $8 billion loss. Just imagine the people that were sitting there like, yeah, this is a smart idea. Let's do this toxic masculinity thing and attack our consumer-based males. That shit blew up in their face, man, over the quarter 1, 2019 and quarter 2, 2019. Blew up in their face. So all of those people are going to be fired, and a whole bunch of people that didn't stand up and block that ad from within their organization, they're going to be fired too over this stupidity. Don't attack your customer base, man. That's a bad strategy. Don't attack your customer base. That's my advice on that one. So let me go ahead and send out some of these links, man, because I know it's a time where a lot of people are stuck in traffic right now. So I kind of just wanted to do this last live stream with the Google Hangouts. It's unfortunate that Google is getting rid of this because, Google Hangouts is so efficient. It's so user-friendly. It's very much unfortunate that they're getting rid of it. I did see Mana Tomorrow in the chat earlier, so I will send him the link, see if he's available right now. But I know he'd be on the road a lot of the times during the day, so he might not be available. But it's a conversation that needs to be had, man, because it's just getting out of hand at this point. It's getting out of hand with this false accusations, the lack of punishment for those that falsely accuse. It's insane at this point. And it's not going to stop until we actually start fighting back. So the responsibility falls on our shoulders because we are the men that are supposed to be protected.